Professor Miyake, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Dr. Nattha.
Your role as the president of Foreign Institute of Japan, can you tell me about the role of the institute?
I was a Japanese diplomat for 27 years. In 2005, my father died, so I just left the government to take over our family business. I took care of the family business, and it's about time to do something else. 10 years ago, Canon established a new think tank. It's called the Canon Institute for Global Studies. So while I'm a president of the Foreign Policy Institute, this is my own entity, I also started working for the Canon Institute. So where I do all the researches and analysis on international, foreign, or national security affairs. So I've been teaching, making speeches, making comments on TV and radio. I do traveling. So I do whatever they want me to do.
Yeah. So what's the role of the institute in particular in order to contribute to foreign policy of Japan?
Right. The president of the Canon Institute asked me to contribute to the society. So whatever meaningful to contributing to the Japanese society, it's okay. So that means I sometimes talk about Japan-China relations, U.S.-China relations, or because I was an Arabic language officer, I can talk about the Middle East. Recently, I'm busier than before. And also, I was in Washington, D.C., so I know a little bit about the politics in Washington. So whenever they want to know more in depth, then I try to give them more precise, accurate pieces of information about whatever they want.
At the current juncture of geopolitics situation in the world, we see the intense of competition, rivalry between the US and China. And we are very much aware of how the US and Japan are very close. You're having close alliance with the US. So how do you see the stance or positioning of Japan at this very juncture?
You raised a very important point, but U.S.-China relations is not the only aspect of my concern or my interest, because in the world there are three, at least different theaters of operation. One in the European theater, then you have Middle Eastern theater, then you have Indo-Pacific theater, where we belong. So in the case of the European theater, NATO failed to deter the Russians. And now we have a war in Ukraine. Then, unfortunately, people in the Middle East, including Saudis and Israelis, failed to deter Hamas and indirectly Iran. So those two theaters are already at war, and it's becoming more and more unstable. But unfortunately, in my personal view, there are three revisionist, or maybe 3.5 revisionist powers in the world. One in Europe, Russians, one in the Middle East, unfortunately Iran, possibly, and in our part of the world, one China and North Korea, if you include them. So those powers are willing to change the status quo, even by force. And unfortunately, those three theaters of operation are now getting closer and closer to each other and intertwined. So for us to be able to deter China, for example, with the United States, what do you think we need the most important, as most important? That is a strong NATO to deter the Russians in Europe, and the stable Middle East to deter the Iranians in the Middle East. Then we can deter the Chinese or North Korean ambitions. So they are all intertwined. So I cannot separate U.S.-China relations alone from the rest of the world. They are all intertwined. Therefore, we should have a global, strategic sort of perspective when we talk about each theater and when we talk about each bilateral relationship. including U.S.-China relations.
So you mean the role of Japan is to maintain close alliance with the U.S. to maintain the status quo under the circumstance that you are facing main challenges from China?
But not only China, from Russians in Europe and the Iranians in the Middle East. And because they are intertwined, you cannot single out the Indo-Pacific region or China to deter them. Because if other theaters are unstable, they can work together again. Therefore, we should have a concerted, unified efforts and action to deter the three areas, three different kinds of ambitions in three different theaters at the same time. And now that we already failed in Europe and the Middle East, we need to double or triple our efforts to stabilize this area together with not only with the Americans but other like-minded countries, including Thailand or other friends in Southeast Asia, to work together. Because for us and for you too, status quo with the universal values, rule of law, democracy, freedom, and human rights, etc., are a basis for our prosperity. See, if our sea lines of communication is unstable, for example, then if somebody challenges the sea lines of communication, you will lose your sources of energy, and so do we. So that's why we need global stabilization efforts in a concerted and unified manner. Otherwise, we will fail.
What's the risk do you think the whole region is facing? Because regarding the US, they have Indo-Pacific strategy. China, they have BRI, Belt and Road initiatives. So, and you have just mentioned that the whole region is intertwined with the global politics.
Right. How we do it?
Yeah.
Simple. It's not only deterrence, but we need dialogue. We need dialogue with the people on the other side. See, the lesson we learned from the war in Ukraine, the biggest lesson, you know what? That is, dictators make mistakes. And absolute dictators make more mistakes simply because they have less accurate information. Therefore, they tend to make mistakes. In order to prevent that from happening, we should continue dialogue with those countries and inform the top leaders with the most accurate information about the situation in the world so that they will not miscalculate. See, that's why we need to continue dialogue with the Chinese government, the Iranian government, or Russian government, and hopefully with the North Korean government.
Well, at this juncture, it's been raised a lot that Southeast Asia, which is part of Indo-Pacific, is under much pressure to choose side between the US and China.
We made a huge mistake in the 1930s. We thought that we could change the international order by force. And then we, instead of liberating Asian neighbors, we colonized them. See? And that is the strategic mistake we made. And we thought that we can change the world. We thought that the Americans in decline, and we thought that we can challenge the Americans in the Western Pacific by force. And then we went to Pearl Harbor, and we lost. Why? Because we made a mistake. It was a huge strategic mistake. But what about China now? They may be repeating the same kind of mistake we made in the 1930s because they think that they can change the world. They think that they can come up with a new international order. They challenge the Americans, and they try to kick Americans out of this area and challenging U.S. or forces or their friends in the South China Sea or East China Sea. That's exactly what I'm worried about. China might be repeating the same mistake we made in the 1930s. Therefore, we should be able to prevent that from happening. We are allied to the United States, but it's not because the United States won the war against us. It's not that way. We should be locate ourselves at the center of the international world, where people enjoy universal values, and that's what we failed to do in the 1930s. So I'm not telling you that we should follow the Americans, or I'm not saying that we should compete with the Chinese. No, we should identify ourselves as embodiment of those universal values in the international community. Therefore, we should locate ourselves at the center of the international community, and if the United States join us, please come. Let's work together. If China doesn't want it, we should convince the Chinese that it's better to be part of the international community, which loves freedom, democracy, and rule of law, etc. Otherwise, we will repeat the same old mistake, which we made in 1930s.
You said you want China to learn from past mistakes from Japan, but what's the message that you like the US to learn from history or from international world order as well? Because China is looking at the US as trying to contain China in the Indo-Pacific. So should the US learn from China's message as well?
The United States should learn that China now is no Japan in the 1930s. Japan could have been contained, but China is too big to contain. So if Americans want to contain China, it's not going to happen. It's a completely different thing. But at the same time, I have to tell the Chinese that you shouldn't repeat the same old mistake we made. And actually, I've been saying this to my Chinese friends since a long time ago. They said, no, we are not that stupid as Japanese did. I don't know. But see, Chinese economy is at the juncture now. They are entering the era of middle income trap. And as you know, in order to get out of the trap, you need to do the following. More domestic demand, deregulation, reforming state-owned companies, and renovation, etc. Those are the things we did, South Koreans did, Taiwanese did, and the Thais did. That's how you get out of the middle income trap. Can China do that? Can they reform state-owned company, for example? They are closely connected to the Chinese Communist Party. How could you reform themselves? How could you deregulate their system, economic system? That would put an end to the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Therefore, it's so difficult. What we could do in the 90s or maybe 80s cannot be done by the Chinese. That's why we have to encourage them. It's much better to change your policy now so that you can overcome the middle income trap and become a more responsible part of the international community. But they stick to the old idea of maintaining the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. I hope they will be successful, but I'm sure that they will fail.
And China, we see they are making friends with their neighbors, with Arab countries, making friends with Russia.
Russia? I don't think they are friends.
You don't think so?
They are couples with marriage of convenience, just convenient partner. They are not strategic allies. Because you see, what they have in common is they hate Americans. Okay, so to that extent, they
have
work
common
together.
enemies.
Right.
They have common enemies.
Well, China doesn't have, but it's a convenient marriage. And so if one of them believe that they can improve relationship with the United States separately, they do it without consulting with each other. So I don't think that Russia-China relations are strategic alliance. It is a marriage of convenience. But having said that, their common interest is so strong now because they are facing NATO in Europe and they are facing us in the Indo-Pacific. Therefore, I think their marriage of convenience will continue at least for a while, but it will not be successful in the end.
So from your capacity as the president of Foreign Policy Institute, what is happening next for the whole world?
Yes, we have to endure the next 10 years. It's an extremely important decade to come. Why? Because China is still on the rise, but their economy will slow down. But still, their weapon systems and ambitions are in the pipeline. So it will continue coming out for the next 10 years. And the Americans are busy in Europe, in the Middle East, and how can we make the best use of the U.S. power of goodwill in our part of the world? It may be getting more and more difficult. And what if Mr. Trump, for example, gets elected again next year? There are so many difficulties we are facing. That's why we have to hang in there for the next 10 years to maintain the status quo. Then, after 10 years, something may change in China. Something may happen in Europe or the United States. That's when the new era, the beginning of a new era may start. So the next 10 years will be an extremely important, challenging era for us and for the countries in Southeast Asia, because we are all trapped, in a sense, between China and the United States, and also Russians to a certain extent. And anything could happen in the Middle East, where we heavily dependent energy-wise. So we have a lot to do, and we have to work together for the next 10 years.
What's your recommendation for Thailand? Thailand is middle income country in Southeast Asia.
Yes.
We belong to ASEAN as well.
True.
So what's your recommendation to Thailand?
Thailand is a precious gem in this part of the world. Has the longest history of independence, and you have a very wise, hard-working people, and many wise leadership. So that's why you have been independent for such a long time. And we want to be like Thailand in a sense, because you are located at the center of the ASEAN area, while you have a good sense of balance so that you can continue to enjoy stability in this part of the world. I think that's exactly what you need, the ASEAN countries need. So I just want to thank Thailand and also thank the people of Thailand who have been working hard to, in the end, stabilize the situation, and so that we will not be trapped in between in the era of instability between China and the United States.
So in what way do you think Thailand can stabilize the whole region?
Well, Thailand should be prosperous, independent, and strong, so that no external powers will interfere with the domestic affairs, and no external affairs challenge or pressure you or challenge your sovereignty or independence. So you have to be strong enough first. Then, in order to do that, you have to be powerful economically. But you have resources, so you continue doing that, and you must have a stable domestic politics as well. So put them all together, you can continue to be strong.
So Thailand should maintain strength that we have in terms of geography, economy, and politically.
So we can work together I mean, we need your stable Thailand, and I hope you need a stable Japan so that we can work together. I think we can do it.
From Japanese perspective, what do you think Thailand can do more in terms of economy and how we can maintain investment from Japan?
I shouldn't comment on the Thai-China economic relations, but this is something I can tell my fellow businessmen, Japanese businessmen, when it comes to the so-called economic security issues. So I'm asking them, okay, you have been already investing in China for such a long time, since the 80s, 90s. So, and they are becoming Chinese companies, okay? And I'm not asking you to completely decouple, but there are conditions. If your company is dealing with the special kind of advanced technologies which could affect Japan's national security, then please come back to Japan. Okay? But otherwise, continue to stay in China and do business as usual, like a Chinese company. This is the way the business goes. So separate the national security related sensitive technologies and the rest of the technologies or know-hows they use in the Chinese market. So I think that's could be applied to the Thailand. See, when it comes to your national security or your stability, then you may have to protect some of the Thai companies, because if you invest in China, sometimes you lose technologies or you lose know-how. Therefore, you have to protect yourself. While if you can continue business with the ordinary technologies or know-hows, or you can do it. That's how economy goes. So I think there's a distinction. There should be a distinction between the sensitive national security related technology, such as semiconductors or maybe AI or whatever technologies, and rest of the technologies.
Foreign policy and economic policy are interrelated. So if you were to give advice or recommendation to Thai companies or Thai government in the next 10 years, what do you like to tell us? What's your take?
My recommendation to Thai companies, of course, Thai is located in a very strategically important, lucky, in a sense, location. Located at the center of Indochina, and of course close to China as well, and you have some cultural ties with them. So you are in the best position to do business with the Chinese. Please go ahead. You see, that's one of the ways to make Thailand more prosperous. But be careful. When it comes to your national security, or when it comes to your strategic long-term interest, then China may not be the best partner. See, so you have to be choosy, selective in making business with other countries, including the United States or maybe Europe as well. But China especially, be careful, because you may make a short-term gain, but longer term, you may not gain as much as you expect. Therefore, I would think twice, but I would not negate the possibility, but I will be more cautious to do business with the communist, closed, potentially dictatorial regime. Even when it comes to trade or economic business. Why? Because in that country, everything is political. Even economic activities are political. So it could change. They can change the rules and standards at any time, depending on the political situation. See, in my country, I mean, even in the United States, economic activities and political activities are separated. See, but in some countries, politics and economy is totally combined. And you cannot separate purely economic activities from the rest. That's why you have to think twice and be careful in doing business with those countries.
But Thailand has to keep balancing in terms of foreign policy
Right.
as well, to be good friends with at least on both sides
Right.
of the US and China.
I think that's probably the best way for Thailand to do. But you see, the balancing is not necessarily a physical balance. Okay, 50% on China and 50% on the United States, or maybe 49 to 51. That's not balancing at this moment. If there are no strategic problems, 50-50 is one way of doing it. But when it comes to a difficult era without internationalism, the balancing is not always 50-50. It could be 70-30. It could be 60-40, depending on your interest. So it's not the balance, perfect balance between 50-50. But when it comes first, it should be the national interest of Thailand. And when it contributes, when something contributes to the Thai national interest, it could be 30%. It could be 40%. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is Thailand national interest itself.
From what is happening around the world, especially the war, Ukraine war, Hamas-Israel war, and it's been predicted whether the war will escalate to other parts of the region.
Exactly.
What's your view in terms of Third World War? Do you think it will happen?
Okay. Well, my concern, as is yours, is the spillover of the Gaza conflict into the Persian Gulf. And if the Iranians started confronting the Americans, for example, directly, then it could involve the entire water areas of the Persian Gulf. And if that happens, our sea lines of communications will be damaged seriously. And there could be some disruption of energy supply from those areas. That's why we should avoid it. And the Americans are doing their best not to escalate the situation. But having said that, if that happens, there's, of course, as you said, a possibility of World War. But it's not going to be World War III as following the World War I or II. World War I and World War II are really all-out conventional warfare in the world. And many major countries are involved with the conventional arms. That's why we fought those wars for years, twice. But fortunately and unfortunately, if something happens between China and the United States, or Russia and the United States, they have nuclear weapons. And fortunately, sad to say this, but fortunately, the nuclear deterrence works. So they have thousands of warheads, and we have thousands of warheads. So if we started the nuclear exchange, that'll be the end of both and the end of the entire world. That's why, fortunately, the nuclear deterrence has worked so far. So even if we have extended conflict globally, even globally out of the Ukraine conflict or war or the Gaza conflict, probably there won't be an all-out war. Because if it becomes an all-out war, they use nuclear weapons. That's the end of the world. So they will hopefully restrain themselves and prevent, and then there are reasons to prevent them from using those nuclear weapons. So if that's the case, the next World War will be a series of limited, conventional, smaller scale, but endless wars of attrition in many parts of the world. Not only Ukraine, or not only in Palestine, but it could happen somewhere in the North Korean Peninsula. That's another one possibility. Or maybe some war of attrition in the South China Sea. These are the things that would threaten us, because that would destroy the sea lines of communication and free passage or freedom of navigation in that part of the water areas. That will be as scary as the previous two world wars.
On the end note, have you seen anything uplifting or positive prediction?
Oh, I am
of
very.
the
I'm
world
always
economy,
positive, and I'm always optimistic. But I have spent maybe too much time in the Middle East, and you cannot expect something optimistic, because once you dream something, you'll be betrayed sometimes. I'm a realist, so I'm not a pessimist. Excuse me, but I try to be optimistic, but while being optimistic, you have to be careful as well. So cautiously optimistic is the right word for me.
Professor Miyake, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.